Monica grabbed the lapels of his suit jacket and went up on her toes before she could stop herself. "Just pretend," she breathed. Park Jin-woo looked down at her, one eyebrow lifting. "Pretend how?" She kissed him. The ballroom died. A waiter froze mid-step, tray tilting in his hand. A champagne glass stopped halfway to someone's mouth. Across the room, James Reed's face drained white, his drink shaking in his grip. Monica pulled back, panic flooding her. "I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have." Jin-woo's arm locked around her waist and pulled her back against him like she belonged there. He looked past her, straight at James. "Is there a problem?" James opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For 4 years, Monica had watched this man own every room he walked into. Now he looked like he wanted to disappear. If you're already hooked, smash that like button, because today's story is packed with shocking twists, dangerous secrets, heartbreaking sacrifices, and a mystery that gets bigger with every revelation. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Subscribe right now, because what happens next, nobody saw coming. A quick reminder before today's story begins. Many viewers asked where they can find more Mafia boss romances without searching through dozens of videos. That's why I created the Ultimate Mafia Boss Love Collection, featuring 15 complete stories, 20 audiobooks, and 5 exclusive bonus stories not available on YouTube, but only through the collection. If you'd love to enjoy these stories anytime without ads or interruptions, you'll find the link in the description. Now, let's get started. Monica Williams only wanted to make one man jealous. She had no idea that one reckless kiss was about to pull her into a world of power, secrets, danger, and a love she never asked for. But before this night was over, someone in that ballroom would become obsessed, and someone would make a mistake they could never take back. Let's rewind. Because to understand how a Chicago girl ended up kissing Seoul's most dangerous man in front of half the city's elite, you have to go back 6 years, to the day Monica Williams landed at Incheon International Airport with 2 suitcases, a business plan scribbled in a notebook, and absolutely no idea what she was walking into. She was 24 then, fresh out of a marketing job she hated, fresh off a breakup that had nothing to do with this story, but had taught her one important lesson. Stop waiting for life to come to you. Go get it. So she did. She'd saved every dollar from 3 years of grinding. She'd researched Seoul's growing expat and luxury events scene obsessively, and she'd convinced herself, against every reasonable voice in her head, that she could build something from absolutely nothing in a country where she didn't speak the language and didn't know a single soul. The first year was brutal, if we're being honest. Seoul does not hand out friendship easily to outsiders, especially not to a Black American woman trying to break into an industry built on connections and old money relationships that went back generations. Monica got turned down for venue contracts because clients didn't think she'd understand Korean wedding customs. She got quoted prices that were double what locals paid, simply because vendors assumed she had endless American money to throw around, which, hilariously, she absolutely did not. She cried more nights than she'd ever admit, sitting in a tiny one-room apartment in Mapo-gu, eating instant ramyeon straight from the pot because she was too exhausted to even use a bowl. But Monica Williams does not know how to quit. That's just not in her programming. So she kept showing up. She learned enough Korean to get by, then enough to actually hold real conversations, then enough that elderly vendors started calling her Uri Monica, our Monica, which might be one of the sweetest things anyone has ever called her. She built relationships one stubborn handshake at a time, and slowly, painfully, beautifully, Monica Williams events became a real thing, a respected thing. The kind of company wealthy families called when they wanted a wedding or a corporate gala that didn't feel like every other wedding or corporate gala in Seoul. It was during her second year, exhausted but proud, scrolling through her phone at a rooftop bar, after closing her first 6-figure contract, that she met James Reed. James was, by every visible measure, a catch. Black American, originally from Atlanta, sharp-dressed, smooth-talking, running an import-export consulting firm that connected American brands with Korean retailers. He had the kind of confidence that filled a room before he even opened his mouth. And when he did open his mouth, it was usually to say something charming enough to make Monica laugh against her will. "You're the event girl everyone's talking about," he said that first night, sliding into the seat next to her like he'd been invited, which he hadn't been. Monica Williams, right? I heard you turned a corporate launch party into something people are still talking about 3 weeks later. And you are, she'd asked, already smiling despite herself. The guy about to buy you a drink, so you'll tell me your secrets. It was corny. It was a line. And it worked anyway. Because James had this way of making every conversation feel like the most important conversation happening in the building. For the next 4 years, that feeling never really went away. They became Seoul's favorite black expat power couple, at least in their own small but mighty social circle. Brunches on Sundays. Trips to Jeju Island. James showing up at her events just to support her, standing in the back with his arms crossed like a proud boyfriend, even when the event had absolutely nothing to do with him. Her friends adored him. Her business partner, a sharp-tongued Korean woman named Jeon, who became Monica's closest confidant in Seoul, used to tease her constantly. When is he proposing? You two have been together longer than some marriages I know. And Monica would just laugh and wave her off, secretly hoping, secretly counting down toward their 4th anniversary, secretly already picturing the kind of wedding she'd plan for herself. Because of course, an event planner has her whole wedding designed in her head before the man even asks. That's the thing about heartbreak nobody warns you about. It rarely announces itself. It doesn't show up with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it shows up quiet, in the form of a man who starts taking phone calls in another room. A man who used to text good morning every single day, suddenly going hours without responding. A man whose eyes used to light up when she walked in, slowly, gradually, learning to look somewhere else instead. Monica noticed. Of course she noticed. She wasn't stupid, and she certainly wasn't blind. But she did what so many of us do when we love someone, and we're terrified of losing them. She made excuses. He's stressed about the business. He's dealing with family stuff back home. He loves me, he's just going through something. She built an entire museum of justifications, brick by brick, because the alternative, that James Reed might be slipping away from her on purpose, was a thought too painful to sit with for longer than a few seconds at a time. What Monica didn't know, what she had absolutely no way of knowing, was that 3 months before that fateful charity gala, James had been introduced at a business dinner to a woman named Yoon Seo-hyun, 26 years old, stunning, in the polished magazine cover way that old Korean money tends to produce, and the only daughter of Yoon Tae-sik, a business tycoon whose name was attached to half the real estate developments shooting up across Gangnam. James Reed, despite all his charm, had always carried a quiet hunger underneath the surface, a hunger for status that Monica's love, no matter how genuine, could never quite satisfy. Monica gave him comfort. Monica gave him devotion. But Seo-hyun offered something else entirely. Access. Wealth that didn't have to be built brick by brick over 4 exhausting years. Wealth that simply existed, waiting to be married into. The decision didn't happen overnight. To be fair to nobody, because James doesn't deserve fairness in this story. Even he wrestled with it for a while. But greed has a funny way of rewriting a person's whole moral compass, when given enough time and enough opportunity. By the time their 4th anniversary was a month away, James had already made up his mind. He just hadn't told Monica yet. The text came on a random Tuesday evening. Monica was elbow-deep in seating chart revisions for a wedding she was planning, her phone propped against a stack of fabric swatches, when it buzzed. "I think we want different things. I'm sorry, this isn't working anymore." That was it. 4 years. 4 years of vacations and inside jokes and late-night conversations about their future, and James Reed ended it with a text message shorter than most of her event invoice line items. Monica called him 11 times that night. He didn't answer a single one. She showed up at his apartment the next morning, and the doorman, a kind older man who'd seen her come and go for years, looked at her with something like pity and told her Mr. Reed wasn't accepting visitors. Not unavailable, not out of town, not accepting visitors. Like she was a stranger. Like she was a problem to be managed, rather than a woman whose entire heart had just been handed back to her in pieces. She spent that week in a fog so thick she barely remembers most of it. Jeon moved into her apartment for 3 days just to make sure she ate something other than tissues and self-pity. Her mother called from Chicago, worried sick, offering to fly out, offering to fly Monica home, offering anything that might pull her daughter out of the hole she'd fallen into. And then, 2 weeks later, the truth arrived, delivered with the kind of casual cruelty only social media can manage. A mutual friend sent her a screenshot. James Reed and Yoon So-hyun, photographed at a gallery opening, his hand resting on the small of her back like it had always belonged there. The caption underneath, written by some entertainment blog that covered Seoul's wealthy elite, read, "Rising entrepreneur James Reed spotted with tycoon's daughter Yoon So-hyun. Sources say wedding bells may not be far off." Monica stared at that photo for a long time, longer than was healthy, and something inside her, something that had been bending and bending under the weight of heartbreak, finally snapped clean into something colder, something harder. She didn't cry that time, she just felt this strange, terrible clarity settle over her, the kind that arrives right before a person decides they refuse to be pitiful anymore. Because here's the part that really stung. The part that took the betrayal and turned it into something almost theatrical in its cruelty. James wasn't satisfied with simply leaving. A man who only wanted to move on quietly would have just moved on quietly. But James wanted Monica to see it. He wanted her to witness exactly what she'd lost, to understand exactly how thoroughly she'd been replaced and by whom. So when Seo-hyun's family announced they were hosting a massive charity gala at one of Seoul's most exclusive hotels, the kind of event with a guest list stuffed full of conglomerate heirs and foreign diplomats and minor celebrities, James personally sent Monica an invitation. Handwritten even. A little touch of cruelty disguised as class. Ji-eun nearly threw the invitation in the trash the second she saw it. "Absolutely not," she said, holding it like it was contaminated. "He is not doing this to you. This man wants you to walk into a room and watch him parade his new fiancée around like a trophy." "I will burn this." "Don't burn it," Monica said quietly. Ji-eun stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Excuse me. I'm going." "Monica." "I am not," Monica said, her voice shaking but somehow steady underneath the shake. "Going to let that man think he broke me. I refuse to let him see me crawl back to Chicago with my tail between my legs. If he wants me in that room, fine. I'll be in that room, and I will look better than I have ever looked in my entire life." Ji-eun studied her for a long moment, then slowly smiled, the kind of proud, slightly terrified smile you give a friend right before they do something either brilliant or catastrophic. "Okay," she said. "Then we are getting you the most expensive dress in this city, and you are going to walk into that ballroom like you own it. If you're feeling Monica's pain right now, drop a comment and let us know. Because trust me, this gala scene is about to break your heart and then completely flip the entire story upside down. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Because what happens next is the moment everything changes." The night of the gala arrived faster than Monica wanted it to. She stood in front of her mirror for nearly an hour, smoothing down a deep red gown that hugged every curve she'd spent years learning to love, despite what anyone else thought. Her hair was styled in soft curls that framed her face. Gold earrings, simple but elegant, caught the light every time she turned her head. She looked, by every objective measure, stunning. For one brief, fragile moment, standing there in her tiny apartment with Ji-eun fussing over her zipper, Monica actually felt something close to confident. That confidence lasted exactly as long as it took her to walk into the ballroom and see James across the room, laughing, his arm wrapped around Yoon So-hyun's waist, introducing her to a cluster of important-looking men like she was some prize he'd won at a county fair. He looked happy, genuinely, infuriatingly happy. And worse, he looked like he had completely forgotten Monica had ever existed at all. She found a corner near the bar and ordered a drink she didn't actually want, just to have something to hold on to. She watched the room swirl around her, watched waiters carry trays of champagne, watched powerful men in tailored suits trade business cards like currency. She told herself she could survive one night. She told herself she'd give it 20 minutes, show her face, prove her point, and leave with whatever dignity she could scrape together on the way out. Then James found her. He approached slowly, deliberately, that same smug confidence she used to find charming, now turning her stomach. "Monica," he said, like her name was a pleasant surprise, rather than the result of an invitation he'd written himself. "Glad you came. James, you look good," he said, his eyes sweeping over her dress in a way that felt less like a compliment and more like an inspection. "Really good. Is there something you wanted to say, or did you just want to look at me?" His smile thinned slightly, that quick flash of irritation he always got when she didn't play along with whatever script he had running in his head. He leaned in close enough that only she could hear him. his voice dropping to something soft and venomous all at once. "You should have accepted that some people are meant for bigger things," he said. Monica felt the words land like a slap. Her throat tightened. Her eyes burned with the threat of tears she refused, absolutely refused, to let fall in front of this man. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because what do you even say to that? What is there to say to a man who just told you, to your face, at a party he invited you to, specifically to humiliate you, that you were never enough? It was in that exact moment, frozen, humiliated, seconds from completely falling apart in front of 200 strangers, that Monica noticed him. A tall man standing near the far windows, alone, untouched by the noise and performance swirling around him. Conversations seemed to part around his presence like water around a stone. A cluster of businessmen who'd been laughing loudly just moments before suddenly lowered their voices when he passed. A security guard near the entrance shifted his stance, subtly, respectfully, the second the man glanced his direction. Monica didn't know his name yet. She just knew, with the kind of instinct that comes from years of reading rooms for a living, that whoever he was, he mattered. And right now, staring at James's smug, satisfied face, drowning in humiliation she had no idea how to swallow, Monica Williams made the single most reckless decision of her entire life. She walked straight toward the stranger by the window. Monica's heels clicked against the marble floor with each step, though later she would swear she didn't remember walking at all. It felt more like floating, like watching herself from somewhere outside her own body. Some calmer version of herself shaking her head and whispering, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" while the rest of her marched forward anyway. The stranger turned slightly as she approached, dark eyes settling on her with an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. Up close, he was even more striking than from across the room. Tailored black suit, not a single thread out of place. A presence that filled the air around him without him needing to say a word. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't explain. She simply reached up, grabbed the lapel of his suit jacket with both hands, and said the only two words her panicked brain could produce. "Just pretend." He raised one eyebrow, the smallest flicker of amusement crossing features that otherwise stayed carved from stone. "Pretend how?" Monica didn't answer with words. She glanced once toward James, who had gone quiet mid-sentence with Seo Hyun still on his arm. And then, before her good sense could catch up with her body, she rose onto her toes and kissed him. The room didn't just get quiet. It got the kind of silence that has weight to it. The kind you can feel pressing against your skin. Somewhere a champagne glass clinked against a tray and didn't move again. A photographer near the entrance, there to cover the gala for some lifestyle magazine, lifted his camera on pure instinct before his brain even processed what he was capturing. Monica pulled back almost immediately, horror flooding through her like ice water. "I am so sorry," she breathed, already stepping back, already preparing to run straight out of that ballroom and possibly out of Seoul entirely. "I don't know why I'm so sorry. His arm came around her waist before she could finish the sentence, gentle but absolutely immovable, pulling her back against his side, like this was the most natural thing in the world. He looked past her, directly at James, whose face had drained of every drop of color it had carried 30 seconds earlier. "Is there a problem?" he asked, calm, unbothered, bored, almost, like he was asking about the weather. James's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. For the first time in the 4 years Monica had known him, she watched genuine fear flicker across his face, and despite the chaos roaring through her chest, some small, vicious part of her felt something close to satisfaction. "No," James finally managed. "No problem at all." "Good," the stranger said, and that was the end of the conversation as far as he was concerned. He guided Monica gently away from the bar, away from James, away from the hundreds of staring eyes, toward a quieter corner near the windows overlooking the city. Once they were out of earshot, Monica finally found her voice again. "I am so sorry," she said for the third time. "I don't even know what came over me. That man, the one I kissed you in front of, that's my ex. He just said something horrible to me and I panicked, and you were just standing there, and I am so sorry. I should never have—" "You're rambling," he said simply. "I'm aware. It's fine." He studied her for a long moment, something calculating moving behind those dark eyes, the kind of look she imagined he used right before closing a business deal worth more money than she'd see in 5 lifetimes. "What's your name?" "Monica. Monica Williams." Park Jin-woo. The name hit her like a small electric shock, and Monica felt every drop of blood drain from her face. She'd heard whispers of that name all night, heard guests murmuring it behind cupped hands, like it was something dangerous to say too loudly. Park Jin-woo, the man rumored to control half the underground business that ran quietly beneath Seoul's glittering surface. The man nobody crossed. The man who, according to half the rumors swirling around this very ballroom, had people disappear when they made the wrong kind of enemies. "Oh my God," Monica whispered. "Oh my God, I just kissed the—" "Careful," Jin-woo said, the corner of his mouth twitching upward in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "People are watching." Smile. Somehow, impossibly, Monica smiled. The rest of that night blurred together in Monica's memory, like watercolors left out in the rain. Jin-woo kept her close for the remainder of the gala, his hand occasionally resting at the small of her back whenever someone approached to make conversation. Every gesture calculated and smooth, the performance of two people who had clearly known each other far longer than the actual 40 minutes they'd spent in each other's company. James watched from across the room the entire time, his jaw tight, his new fiancée's hand gripping his arm a little too firmly, like even she could sense something had shifted in the air. By the time Monica got home that night, peeled off the red dress, and collapsed onto her bed, her phone was already exploding. Texts from Ji-eun, all caps, demanding to know everything. Texts from friends she hadn't spoken to in months, suddenly very interested in catching up. And worst of all, when she finally worked up the nerve to check social media, she found her own face staring back at her from at least a dozen different accounts. Someone had posted the photo. Of course someone had posted the photo. A grainy but unmistakable shot of Monica on her toes, lips against Jin-woo's, his arms sliding around her waist. The caption underneath, from some gossip account that covered Seoul's elite nightlife, read, "Who is the mystery woman who just claimed Seoul's most dangerous bachelor?" By morning, it had thousands of shares. By noon, actual news outlets had picked it up. Speculation ran wild. Some articles called her a foreign socialite. Others claimed she was a secret business partner. One particularly creative blog suggested she might be an undercover government agent, which made Monica laugh out loud for the first time in weeks, mostly because it was so wildly, hilariously untrue. Ji-eun showed up at her apartment within the hour, bursting through the door without bothering to knock. Phone already in hand. "You," she said, pointing dramatically, "have some serious explaining to do." "I panicked," Monica said into a pillow she'd buried her face in. "I panicked, and I did something insane. And now my face is on the internet, next to the words, Seoul's most dangerous bachelor. And I genuinely don't know what to do with myself." "Okay," but Ji-eun said, sitting down on the edge of the bed and scrolling rapidly through her phone. "The comments are actually kind of obsessed with you." Someone wrote, quote, "This woman has main character energy and I am here for it." Another one says, "James who? Monica, I think you accidentally became Seoul's favorite mystery woman." That is not helpful, Ji-eun. I'm just saying, there are worse things than the internet thinking you're dating a hot, terrifying gangster. Monica groaned into the pillow again, and that's when her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. "We need to talk. Send a car for you at 3 p.m. Don't worry, it's not what you're thinking." Jin-woo. Monica stared at the message for a long moment, her stomach doing something complicated between dread and curiosity. "Ji-eun," she said slowly, "I think the Mafia boss just texted me." "What?" The car arrived precisely at 3. Black, sleek, the kind of vehicle that made the entire street feel slightly underdressed just by existing on it. The driver, a quiet, serious-looking man who introduced himself only as Min, opened the door for her without a single question. Like picking up random women who'd kissed his boss at a gala was just a regular Tuesday for him. They drove to a penthouse office in Gangnam, the kind with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city, the kind of view that made Monica's breath catch despite the nerves twisting through her stomach. Jin-woo was waiting when she arrived, standing by the window with his back to her, dressed in a simpler black shirt this time, looking almost approachable if she didn't already know better. "You wanted to talk," Monica said, hovering near the doorway, unsure whether to sit or stand or simply turn around and run back to the elevator. "Sit," he said, gesturing toward a chair across from his desk. She sat. He turned to face her, studying her for a long moment before finally speaking. I have a proposition for you. If this is some kind of payback for the kiss, I really did already apologize. It's not payback. He moved to lean against the edge of his desk, arms crossed. Last night, by accident, you solved a problem I've had for a while. I'm sorry. What? There's an organization, a rival group, that has been watching me closely for months, looking for any sign of weakness, any pattern in my life they could exploit. He said this so casually, so matter-of-factly, that for a moment Monica forgot to be terrified and just felt confused instead. They believe a man with nothing to lose is more dangerous and less predictable than a man who has something to protect. For a while now, certain people have been suggesting I should appear more settled, more human, less of a target. And I just happened to kiss you in front of the entire city. You did. Something that might have been the ghost of a smile crossed his face again. It was sloppy, it was reckless, it worked better than anything my own people could have arranged on purpose. Okay, but what does that mean for me? Jin-Woo studied her for a long moment, the kind of look that made Monica feel like he was running calculations behind those dark eyes, weighing risk and benefit, the way other people weighed whether to order dessert. 3 months, he said finally. You play the role of my girlfriend. Public appearances, a handful of events. Enough to maintain the appearance that the relationship is real and serious. In return, I provide resources to support your business, whatever it needs to survive and thrive. After 3 months, you walk away with no obligations, and I owe you a favor. Monica blinked at him. You want me to fake date you for 3 months? As what? A business arrangement? Essentially. That is insane. Most good decisions look insane before they work, he said simply. I'm going to say no, Monica said, standing up, smoothing down her skirt with hands that were shaking slightly more than she wanted to admit. I appreciate the offer, genuinely, but I have a business to run, and pretending to date a man whose name makes entire rooms go silent is not exactly in my 5-year plan. Jin-Woo didn't argue. He simply nodded once, like he'd expected this answer, and let her leave without another word. She said no again 2 days later, when he called to follow up, her voice firm even as her stomach churned with something she refused to call curiosity. Then, 4 days after that, Monica's biggest client, a luxury department store chain that had hired her for an enormous seasonal launch event, abruptly canceled their contract. No real explanation given, just a generic email about shifting priorities that smelled, to anyone with half a brain, like something or someone had quietly applied pressure behind the scenes. Monica sat in her empty office that night, staring at her laptop screen, watching months of projected revenue disappear into thin air, and felt something cold settle in her chest. She didn't know for certain Jin-Woo had anything to do with it. She wanted to believe he didn't, but the timing was too perfect to be a coincidence, and Monica had built an entire business on understanding exactly how these wealthy, powerful circles worked. Sometimes the message wasn't sent directly. Sometimes it was sent through silence, through canceled contracts, through doors quietly closing one after another until you had no choice but to walk through the only one still open. She called him the next morning, before she'd even had coffee. I have conditions, she said the moment he picked up, before he could even say hello. There was a pause on the other end, and then, unmistakably, the sound of him almost laughing. I'm listening. My business stays mine. You help, you don't control. If I show up to your events, I show up as myself, not some version of me you've decided is more convenient. And the second this stops being safe, the second I feel like I'm actually in danger, instead of just playing pretend, I walk away, no questions asked. Agreed, he said, without hesitation, which somehow unsettled her more than if he'd argued. And one more thing. Monica took a deep breath. I want to know exactly what I'm walking into. No surprises, no secrets that put me in danger I don't know about. There was a longer pause this time, the kind that told her she'd touched on something he hadn't fully planned to discuss. I'll tell you what I can, he said finally. Come by my office tomorrow. I'll have the paperwork ready. That's how Monica Williams found herself, less than 2 weeks after a heartbreak that had nearly destroyed her, signing a contract to become the fake girlfriend of Seoul's most feared crime boss. If you think this is wild, just wait, because the way these two fall for each other for real is about to make you forget this ever started as a lie. Comment, still watching, if you're staying for the whole story, because trust me, this is exactly where things start getting good. The first official event came faster than Monica expected. A business dinner, small by Jinwoo's standards, just 20 or so guests at a private restaurant overlooking the Han River. Jinwoo picked her up himself this time, no driver sent ahead, and when he saw her standing in her doorway in a simple black dress, he actually paused for a half-second longer than necessary before speaking. "You look good," he said, the words coming out almost reluctantly, like he hadn't planned on saying them out loud. "Don't sound so surprised," Monica shot back, grabbing her purse. "I do this for a living, remember? Making things look good. I'm just usually doing it for other people's weddings, not my own fake relationship." That earned her something rare. A genuine laugh, short and surprised, like it had escaped before he could stop it. "Fair point," he said. The dinner itself was a masterclass in tension Monica hadn't anticipated. Every guest at the table seemed to be measuring every word, every glance, every small gesture between her and Jinwoo, searching for cracks in whatever story they were supposed to be selling. Monica, drawing on years of managing wealthy, demanding event clients, slid into the role more naturally than she expected. Laughing at the right moments, resting her hand on his arm when the conversation called for it, asking just enough questions about everyone's business to seem genuinely interested without overstepping. Jinwoo, for his part, surprised her too. He wasn't the cold, untouchable figure the rumors had built him up to be. Not entirely. When one of the older businessmen made a tasteless joke about Monica's accent, Jinwoo's expression didn't change much, but his voice dropped half a degree colder when he responded. Just enough that the man immediately backpedaled and changed the subject. Small, quiet protection. The kind nobody else at that table probably even noticed. "You didn't have to do that," Monica murmured to him later as they waited for the car after dinner. "Do what?" "Shut him down. For me." Jinwoo looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable crossing his face before he answered. "You're representing something that matters to me right now," he said. "I protect what's mine." "I'm not actually yours, though," Monica said, half joking, half testing the water. "Remember? Fake. Pretend. 3 months. Right," he said. But something in the way he said it made Monica's stomach do a small, confused flip she immediately decided to ignore. Over the following weeks, the arrangement settled into something resembling a routine. Public appearances scattered throughout her actual work schedule. Charity dinners, a gallery opening, one excruciatingly long opera performance Jinwoo insisted on attending because, apparently, even Mafia bosses had board members to impress. And in between those staged moments, something Monica hadn't expected at all began happening. She started actually learning who Jinwoo was. She learned it in pieces, the way you learn anything real about a person. Not through grand confessions, but through small, accidental moments he probably didn't realize were revealing anything at all. The way he quietly paid for an elderly street vendor's entire cart of vegetables one rainy evening without a word, then kept walking like it hadn't happened. The way his driver, Min, spoke about him with a loyalty that went far beyond what money could buy. The kind of loyalty that comes from someone who has actually been protected, actually been cared for, by the man he worked for. And then there was the orphanage. Monica found out about it by accident, 3 weeks into the arrangement, when she noticed a recurring line item buried deep in some financial documents Jinwoo had handed her to review for an upcoming charity event he wanted her to help organize. A monthly transfer, substantial, to something called Hanul Children's Home. When she asked him about it, casually, expecting some boring explanation about tax write-offs, Jinwoo had gone uncharacteristically quiet. "It's not something I talk about," he said finally. "You don't have to," Monica said gently. "I just noticed it, and I was curious. That's all." He was quiet for so long, she thought the conversation was over. Then, surprising her completely, he started talking. "My mother left when I was young," he said, his voice flat, careful. The voice of a man unpacking something he'd kept locked away for a very long time. "My father wasn't. He wasn't a good man. I spent 2 years in a place like that. Before things changed for me." He didn't elaborate on exactly how things had changed, and Monica didn't push. "I started funding it 8 years ago. Anonymously. Nobody outside of a handful of people knows. Why tell me?" He looked at her then. Really looked at her. In a way that made her feel like he was seeing something underneath all the carefully arranged surfaces she usually presented to the world. "I don't know," he admitted. I just wanted to. Monica didn't have a response for that. She just sat there, feeling something shift quietly inside her chest. Something she absolutely refused to name out loud. Not yet, maybe not ever, but something real, all the same. Before we continue, a quick note for everyone who loves these mafia boss romance stories. I've bundled 20 of our most loved Afro-Korean romance stories into the Ultimate Mafia Boss Love Collection. You'll get all 15 complete stories, 20 audiobook versions, plus 5 exclusive bonus stories you won't find on YouTube. If you'd love to enjoy these stories anytime, without ads or interruptions, you'll find the link in the description below. The weeks blurred together after that. Monica had set out to keep her distance, to treat this whole arrangement the way she treated any business contract, professionally, with clear boundaries and an exit date circled in red on some imaginary calendar in her head. But somewhere between the orphanage confession and the Tuesday, he showed up unannounced at her office carrying 2 coffees and absolutely no explanation for why he was there. The line between fake and real had started smudging, in ways neither of them wanted to admit out loud. "You didn't have to come all the way here," Monica said, eyeing the coffee he set on her desk with suspicion. "We don't have an event today, I know. So why are you here?" Jin-woo glanced around her cramped little office, taking in the mood boards pinned to the wall, the half-finished seating charts scattered across her desk, the small framed photo of her and Ji-eun grinning at some long-forgotten beach trip. "I had a meeting nearby," he said. "I thought you might want coffee. You have an entire team of people who could have sent coffee. I wanted to bring it myself." He said this so plainly, so without performance, that Monica didn't have a single sarcastic comeback ready for once in her life. She just sat there, holding her coffee, feeling her face heat up in a way that had absolutely nothing to do with the temperature of the cup. "Okay," Ji-eun said later that afternoon, after she'd badgered the entire story out of Monica over lunch. "I need you to hear yourself right now. A mafia boss personally delivered you coffee. Not sent it, delivered it, with his own 2 terrifying hands. It doesn't mean anything, Monica. It was coffee, Ji-eun. It was never just coffee," Ji-eun said, pointing her chopsticks at her like a weapon. "Men like that do not waste their own time on errands that mean nothing. You are in trouble, my friend. Delicious, terrifying trouble." Monica laughed it off, the way she'd laughed off every increasingly obvious sign over the past several weeks. But that night, lying in bed, staring at her ceiling, she couldn't quite shake the warmth that still lingered from that small gesture. A man whose name made grown businessmen go quiet had walked into her cluttered little office just to bring her coffee. And worse, far worse, she had genuinely, completely enjoyed it. The growing closeness between them didn't go unnoticed, not by Ji-eun, not by Min the driver who'd started greeting Monica with an actual smile instead of his usual polite nod, and certainly not by James. James had expected, when he'd practically engineered that humiliating gala invitation, to watch Monica crumble. He'd expected to see her leave that party in tears, maybe spend a few weeks posting sad quotes online, and then eventually fade quietly into the background of his new life, a footnote in the success story he was busy building with Seo-hyun. What he had absolutely not expected was to watch her, weeks later, glowing on the arm of one of the most powerful men in the country. Photographed at events James himself wasn't important enough to be invited to. It started small. A passing comment here, a mutual friend mentioning, in front of him, how good Monica looked lately, how her business had apparently picked up some serious new investment, how she seemed happier than they'd ever seen her. James would laugh it off in the moment, make some dismissive remark about how it wouldn't last, how a woman like Monica didn't belong in circles like that. But underneath the dismissiveness, something uglier was beginning to twist itself into shape. It became impossible to ignore the night he saw the magazine spread. An actual lifestyle magazine, the kind that profiled Seoul's most interesting up-and-coming power players, had run a feature on women in business, and there, photographed beautifully against the backdrop of one of her own events, was Monica. The article praised her growth, mentioned the exciting new partnership rumored behind her company's recent expansion, and included, almost as an afterthought, a single line that made James's blood boil. "Williams has recently been seen in the company of businessman Park Jin-woo." James read that sentence approximately 14 times. He told himself it didn't matter. He told himself he had everything he wanted. The wedding planning with Seo-hyun was already underway. Her father had all but promised him a senior position at one of the family's subsidiary companies. His life was exactly where he'd engineered it to be. But somewhere underneath all of that careful planning, a small, ugly voice kept whispering the same question over and over. How is she doing better than me? It started with small, seemingly innocent texts. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. Monica didn't respond to the first one, or the second. By the fifth text, 3 weeks later, the tone had shifted entirely. I miss you. I think about us all the time. I made a mistake. Monica stared at that particular message for a long time, sitting in her apartment with Ji-eun watching her like a hawk from across the couch. Don't, Ji-eun said simply. I'm not going to respond. You're thinking about it. I can see you thinking about it. I'm allowed to be confused for 5 seconds, Ji-eun. The man broke my heart into 1,000 pieces, and now he's saying he made a mistake. That's allowed to mess with my head a little. It is, Ji-eun agreed, softening slightly. But you know what's not allowed? Letting that man back into your life after everything he put you through. You deserve so much better than second-hand regret, Monica. You deserve someone who chose you the first time. Monica didn't respond to James's text that night, or the one after it. But James, it turned out, did not handle silence gracefully. He showed up outside her office 2 days later, waiting by his car like he had every right to be there. Like 4 years of history gave him a permanent pass to interrupt her life whenever the mood struck him. Monica nearly walked straight past him, but he caught her arm gently before she could. Can we talk? He asked. Please, just 5 minutes. I don't think there's anything left to talk about, James. I made a mistake, he said, the words tumbling out faster now, less rehearsed than his texts had been. Seo-hyun, that whole thing, it's not what I thought it would be. I miss you, Monica. I miss us. I think about you constantly. You ended a 4-year relationship over text message, Monica said, her voice steady, despite the way her hands had started trembling slightly at her sides. You invited me to that gala, specifically to humiliate me. You told me, to my face, that some people are meant for bigger things, like I was something you'd outgrown. And now, weeks later, because I'm apparently doing better than you expected, you want to talk about mistakes? I was wrong, James said. I know I was wrong. Please, just give me a chance to fix this. There's nothing to fix, Monica said. There's nothing here anymore, James. You made sure of that. She walked away from him that day, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Like she'd finally said out loud all the things she'd been holding in since that horrible text message had first arrived. But James didn't stop. If anything, her rejection only seemed to feed whatever ugly thing had taken root inside him, turning what had started as wounded ego into something far more obsessive. He called, repeatedly. He showed up at events he had no real reason to attend, just to watch from across the room, his eyes following Monica and Jin-woo with an intensity that made even Ji-eun uncomfortable when she noticed it happening at a charity dinner a few weeks later. He's watching you again, Ji-eun whispered, nodding subtly toward where James stood near the bar, drink in hand, gaze fixed in their direction. That man needs a hobby. Jin-woo noticed too, of course. Jin-woo noticed everything, but he never said much about it directly, just occasionally tightened his grip slightly at her waist when James was nearby. A small, almost protective gesture that Monica was starting to find harder and harder to write off as performance. It was around this time that things between Monica and Jin-woo began shifting in ways neither of them had planned for, neither of them had signed any contract for. Late one evening, after a particularly long charity auction that had run far past schedule because 2 elderly conglomerate heirs got into a genuinely petty bidding war over a painting neither of them actually wanted, Jin-woo drove Monica home himself instead of sending Min. You were impressive tonight, he said, as they idled outside her apartment building. That speech you gave about the Children's Foundation, you didn't even need notes. I know how to sell a room on caring about something, Monica said, smiling slightly. It's my entire job. It wasn't just selling, Jin-woo said. I could tell you actually meant it. Monica looked over at him, surprised by the directness of the observation, by how closely he'd apparently been paying attention to something that wasn't even part of their arrangement. I did mean it, she admitted. Watching you fund that orphanage all these years, without telling anyone, it made me actually care about doing it right tonight, you know? Making sure the money actually reaches kids who need it. Jin-woo was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dark street ahead of them. Can I tell you something? he asked finally. Always. I haven't slept well in years, he said. Since I took over my father's, since I took over everything. There's always something. Always someone trying to take advantage. Always some new threat to manage. Always somebody waiting for me to show weakness so they can move in. He glanced over at her. The last few weeks have been the first time in a long time I've actually slept through the night. Monica's heart did something complicated and confusing in her chest. Jin-woo. I know this wasn't supposed to be real, he said quietly, before she could finish whatever sentence she'd been about to attempt. I know what we agreed to, but I wanted you to know that. She reached over and took his hand, the gesture small but deliberate. The first time she'd initiated any kind of contact between them that wasn't for an audience. I haven't been sleeping great either, she admitted, but for completely different reasons than you'd think. He looked at their joined hands, then up at her face, something unguarded crossing his features, for just a moment, before the usual careful composure slid back into place. We should probably be careful, he said. Probably, Monica agreed. Neither of them let go. The shift didn't happen all at once. It happened in small increments, the way real feelings tend to creep in when you're not paying close enough attention to stop them. Dinners that ran longer than necessary because neither of them wanted to leave first. Texts that had nothing to do with their arrangement at all, just Jin-woo asking how a particular event had gone, just Monica sending him a ridiculous meme she knew would only confuse him, just to see if she could get him to respond with one of his rare, genuine laughs. Ji-eun noticed the shift before Monica was willing to admit it to herself. You're falling for him, she announced one evening, completely unprompted, while they sat together reviewing vendor contracts for an upcoming wedding. I am not. Monica, it's a business arrangement. You light up your entire phone screen every time his name pops up. I've watched you do it. You did it literally 30 seconds ago. That doesn't mean anything. It means everything, Ji-eun said, setting down her pen with the kind of seriousness she usually reserved for actual emergencies. Listen to me, I love you, I want you happy. And I think, somewhere along the way, this ridiculous fake relationship stopped being fake for you. I think it might have stopped being fake for him too. Monica didn't answer right away. She just stared at the contract in front of her, the words blurring slightly as her mind drifted somewhere else entirely. Somewhere full of coffee deliveries and quiet confessions in parked cars, and a man who, despite everything Soul whispered about him, had somehow made her feel safer than she'd felt in years. Even if that's true, she said finally. What happens in 5 weeks when the contract ends? What happens then? Ji-eun didn't have an answer for that. Neither, as it turned out, did Monica. Meanwhile, James's obsession had curdled into something far more dangerous than wounded pride. He'd started doing something he never imagined himself capable of, the kind of thing that, on any normal day, with any clear head, he would have recognized immediately as a catastrophic mistake. He'd begun asking questions, quiet, careful questions. At first, just to mutual acquaintances who might have some passing knowledge of Jin-woo's business dealings. Then, when that yielded nothing useful, he started digging deeper, reaching out to contacts he had no business reaching out to. Men on the fringes of Seoul's business world who knew things respectable people weren't supposed to know. It started as simple jealousy, the kind of petty curiosity that wants ammunition, wants something, anything, to prove that Jin-woo was using Monica, that whatever she'd found with him couldn't possibly be real. But petty curiosity has a way of opening doors that should have stayed firmly shut. One evening, at a private members club James had recently been invited to join, thanks largely to So-hyun's family connections, he found himself seated across from a man named Director Choi, a smooth-talking businessman with a reputation James had heard whispered about but never fully understood. Choi had connections to a group, James would later learn, that had been circling Jin-woo's operations for months, looking for any weakness they could exploit. You seem troubled, Choi observed, swirling his drink. Something on your mind? James, 2 whiskeys deep, and still nursing a wound to his pride that refused to heal, let his guard down further than he should have. It's nothing, he said. Just an old, complicated situation. Complicated how? There's a woman, James said slowly. She used to be mine. Now she's, I don't know, involved with someone she has no business being involved with. Choi's expression sharpened, just slightly, the kind of subtle shift James was far too distracted to notice. Involved with someone like who? James hesitated for just a moment. the last functioning piece of his good judgment screaming at him to stop talking, to walk away from this conversation before it went any further. But jealousy and 3 whiskeys had a way of drowning out good judgment entirely. "Park Jin-woo," he said. Something flickered behind Choi's eyes. Quick and predatory, gone almost as fast as it appeared. "Is that so?" Choi said, his voice carefully neutral now. "Tell me more about her." This woman, and James, God help him, did. He told Choi about Monica's business, about the events she attended with Jin-woo, about her apartment in Mapo-gu, about her business partner, about the rhythm of her weekly schedule that he, having dated her for 4 years, knew better than almost anyone alive. He told himself, in some small justifying corner of his mind, that he was just venting, just talking, that none of this information could possibly matter to anyone. He told himself this even as Choi's questions grew more specific, more pointed, more dangerously precise. By the time James stumbled out of that club hours later, he had no idea, none whatsoever, that he had just handed a very dangerous organization everything they needed to find and target the woman who, despite every betrayal, despite every cruel word, he was still desperately, selfishly obsessed with. 3 days later, Monica didn't show up to a scheduled meeting with a client. She didn't answer Ji-eun's calls. She didn't answer Jin-woo's calls either. And Jin-woo, who answered for nothing, who let calls go unanswered from senators and conglomerate chairmen without a second thought, found himself calling her number for the 11th time in an hour, his usual calm composure cracking in ways nobody who knew him would have recognized. By that evening, when Min finally broke into Monica's apartment at Jin-woo's furious instruction and found it empty, her phone smashed on the floor, the front door unlocked and swinging slightly in the evening breeze, Park Jin-woo understood, with terrifying clarity, exactly what had happened. Monica Williams had been taken. Park Jin-woo had built an empire on control, on knowing exactly where every piece sat on the board before his enemies even realized a game was being played. For years, that careful, ruthless control had been the only thing keeping him alive, the only thing that mattered. Standing in Monica's empty apartment, staring down at her shattered phone, every single ounce of that control evaporated in an instant. "Find her," he said, his voice low and terrifyingly quiet. The kind of quiet that made Min's blood run cold, despite years of working beside this man through every kind of crisis imaginable. "Find her now. I don't care what it costs. I don't care who you have to hurt. Find her." "Boss," Min said carefully, "we need to think this through. If this is who I think it is." "I know who it is," Jin-woo said. "Choi's been circling for months. This has his fingerprints all over it." He turned, and for the first time in years, Min saw something in his employer's face that looked dangerously close to panic. "Get me everyone. Every contact, every informant, every favor anyone has ever owed me. Tonight." Within an hour, Jin-woo's entire organization had mobilized in a way nobody had seen since the early, brutal days when he'd first taken control after his father's death. Men were dispatched to every property Choi's organization was known to use. Phones were tapped. Old debts were called in with a ruthlessness that left even longtime associates uneasy. This wasn't business anymore. This was something else entirely. Something raw and personal that none of them had ever seen from him before. Ji-eun arrived at Jin-woo's penthouse office sometime past midnight, having heard the news from a frantic, garbled voicemail Min had left her. She found Jin-woo standing at the window, staring out at the city lights, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his usual composed exterior completely gone. "You'll find her," Ji-eun said, though her voice shook with the same fear gripping the entire room. "You will. You have to. I should have had more protection on her," Jin-woo said, not turning around. "I knew this was risky. I told myself it was contained. I told myself I had it handled. This isn't your fault." "It's exactly my fault," he said, finally turning to face her, his eyes red-rimmed in a way that made Ji-eun's chest ache, despite barely knowing this man. "She agreed to this because her business was struggling, because of me, because of what people assumed when she kissed me at that gala. None of this happens to her if I'm not in her life. And none of the good things happen either," Ji-eun shot back. "The coffee, the orphanage you told her about, the way she's talked about you for weeks now, even when she pretends she's not talking about you. That's not nothing, Jin-woo. Don't you dare stand here and erase all of that because you're scared. Jinwoo didn't respond, but something in his jaw tightened, like he was holding himself together through sheer will alone. Meanwhile, miles away, in a cold, windowless room somewhere on the outskirts of the city, Monica sat tied to a chair, her wrists raw from the rope, her heart hammering so loudly, she was certain whoever was guarding the door outside could hear it. They hadn't hurt her. Not yet, but the men who'd taken her from her apartment that afternoon had been brutally efficient about it, professional in a way that terrified her more than violence would have. Like this was just routine for them, like she was simply cargo to be moved and held until further instructions arrived. A man entered the room sometime later, well-dressed, calm, the kind of calm that made her skin crawl far more than shouting would have. "Miss Williams," he said pleasantly, like they were meeting at a business luncheon rather than a hostage situation. "I apologize for the inconvenience. This needn't be unpleasant for you, provided certain people understand the message we're sending." "What do you want?" Monica managed, proud of how steady her voice came out, despite the way her entire body shook. "Mr. Park has become a problem for a great many people," the man said. "We simply need him to understand what happens when he refuses to share what should rightfully be shared. You, my dear, are an unfortunate but extremely effective way of communicating that message." Monica's mind raced, terror and fury warring for control over her thoughts. She thought of James, of the questions he must have asked, the information he must have given away without ever understanding what it would cost. She thought of Jinwoo, of his face the last time she'd seen him, soft and unguarded in a way Seoul's most feared man almost never allowed himself to be. She wondered if she'd ever see that face again. James found out about Monica's disappearance the way most of Seoul eventually did, through a phone call from a panicked mutual friend who'd heard whispers through the grapevine that something terrible had happened. He sat frozen on his couch, Seo-hyun beside him asking what was wrong, and felt the entire world tilt sideways beneath him as the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Choi, the questions at the club, the information he'd handed over without a second thought, drowning in jealousy and whiskey and wounded pride. James had done this. Not directly, not with his own hands, but he had handed the match to the person who lit the fire. And now Monica, the woman he had once promised forever to, the woman he had cruelly humiliated at a gala he'd planned specifically to hurt her, was missing, possibly hurt, possibly worse, because of him. "James." Seo-hyun's voice sounded distant, muffled by the roaring in his ears. "James? What's wrong?" He didn't answer her. He simply stood up, grabbed his keys, and walked out the door, driving without any real destination in mind, until he found himself parked outside Jinwoo's office building, staring up at the lit windows on the top floor, every ounce of his earlier arrogance replaced by something he hadn't felt in years. Genuine, crushing guilt. He took the elevator up, ignoring the security guards who tried to stop him, his desperation apparently enough to push past their attempts to detain him, until he stumbled into the penthouse office where Jinwoo and Jian stood, huddled over a map spread across the desk. "I need to tell you something," James said, breathless, his voice cracking. "It's my fault. What happened to Monica? It's my fault." Jinwoo's head snapped up, the look in his eyes so dark, so absolutely murderous, that Min, standing nearby, instinctively stepped between the two men. "Explain," Jinwoo said, his voice deadly quiet. "Right now." James explained everything, his voice shaking, tears streaming down his face that nobody in that room had any patience or sympathy for. He told them about Choi, about the club, about every careless word he'd handed over without thinking, without understanding the danger he was placing Monica in simply to soothe his own bruised ego. When he finished, the silence in the room stretched out long and brutal. Jinwoo crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, grabbing James by the collar with enough force to lift him slightly off the ground. "If anything happens to her," Jinwoo said, his voice trembling with barely controlled fury, "you will spend the rest of your life understanding exactly what you've done." "I know," James choked out. "I know. Please, just, whatever you need, whatever I can do to help find her. Please, let me help." Jinwoo released him, shoving him backward, disgust written plainly across every feature. But the information James had provided, even gained through such reckless, selfish behavior, gave them something they hadn't had before: a name. A location Choi's organization used for exactly this kind of operation. "Move!" Jinwoo barked at his men. "Now." The convoy of black cars tore through Seoul's streets in the dead of night. Jin-woo himself, riding in the lead vehicle, his hands clenched so tightly around a pistol that his knuckles had gone white. Min drove in tense silence beside him, occasionally glancing over, watching his employer wrestle with something far more dangerous than any rival organization had ever managed to provoke in him before. Fear. Real, gut-wrenching fear. For someone other than himself. "We're close," Min said finally, as the warehouse district loomed ahead of them, dark and silent in the night. They moved in fast, the kind of coordinated, brutal efficiency Jin-woo's organization was infamous for, overwhelming Choi's small group of guards before any of them could fully process what was happening. Jin-woo himself led the charge into the building, kicking through doors with a single-minded focus that left absolutely no room for hesitation. He found her in the third room he checked, tied to a chair, her face pale but her eyes fierce, defiant, exactly the same fire he'd fallen for somewhere along the way without ever fully admitting it to himself. "Jin-woo," Monica breathed, relief and disbelief crashing through her all at once. He crossed the room in seconds, cutting through her restraints with quick, careful movements, his hands shaking slightly as he checked her over for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough with an emotion he'd spent years training himself never to show. "I'm okay," Monica said. "I'm okay. I'm okay. You found me. I'm okay." He pulled her into his arms then, holding her so tightly she could feel his heart pounding against her own chest. Both of them shaking with the aftermath of terror neither had fully processed yet. "I thought," he started, then stopped, his voice breaking in a way that surprised them both. "I thought I lost you." "You didn't," Monica whispered into his shoulder. "You didn't lose me." Outside, his men had Choi's remaining people secured, and within hours, the full extent of the organization's plot had been exposed and dismantled with a thoroughness that sent a clear message throughout Seoul's underworld about what happened to anyone foolish enough to threaten Park Jin-woo's people again. If you're crying right now, we are too. Besties, please comment "she's safe" if your heart finally settled, and make sure you've subscribed, because the way this story wraps up is going to leave you completely speechless. Recovery took time. Monica spent the first 2 days in Jin-woo's penthouse, surrounded by a level of security that felt almost excessive until she remembered exactly what had happened to her, exactly how close she had come to a fate nobody wanted to speak about directly. Ji-eun barely left her side, alternating between fierce protectiveness and the occasional joke about how she was never, ever letting Monica attend another fancy party without a personal bodyguard again. Jin-woo, for his part, seemed almost unable to leave Monica's presence for more than a few minutes at a time, hovering nearby with a quiet intensity that would have felt suffocating from anyone else but, from him, felt like something else entirely. Like devotion. Like a man who had genuinely believed, for several of the longest hours of his life, that he might lose someone who had become more important to him than he had ever planned to allow. James, meanwhile, found himself facing the full weight of consequences he had spent years avoiding through charm and privilege alone. Si-hun, upon learning the full truth of what had happened, what his careless jealousy had nearly cost a woman's life, ended their engagement without hesitation, disgusted by the lengths his selfishness had reached. His family connections, the access he'd spent so much energy chasing, evaporated almost overnight, as word spread through Seoul's business circles about exactly what kind of man James Reed truly was, underneath the charm. He showed up at Jin-woo's building one final time, weeks later, asking only to apologize directly to Monica, to say the things he should have said months earlier, instead of the cruelty he'd chosen at that gala. Monica agreed to see him, mostly because Ji-eun insisted that closure, real closure, mattered more than avoidance ever could. "I am so sorry," James said, sitting across from her in a small cafe, neither Jin-woo nor his security detail fully approved of, though they hovered close enough to intervene if needed. "For everything. The breakup, the gala, what I did with Choi. I let jealousy turn me into someone I genuinely don't recognize anymore. You could have died because of my mistake, and I will carry that for the rest of my life." "You're right," Monica said simply. "You should carry that. I know I don't deserve forgiveness." "No," Monica agreed. "You don't, but I'm not interested in carrying anger toward you forever, James. That's too heavy a thing to hold on to. And honestly, I have better things to do with my heart these days." She stood, smoothing down her dress, looking at the man who had once been the center of her entire world, with something that felt, finally, blessedly, like peace instead of pain. I hope you figure out who you actually want to be. I really do. But that's not my job to manage anymore. She walked out of that cafe and didn't look back. And for the first time since that horrible text message had arrived months earlier, Monica Williams felt something settle completely. Quietly, permanently inside her chest. The contract between Monica and Jinwoo had technically expired during her recovery, the 3 months long since passed in the chaos of everything that had happened. Neither of them had mentioned it. Neither of them, it seemed, particularly wanted to. One evening, weeks after everything had finally settled, Jinwoo brought her to the rooftop of his building. The entire glittering expanse of Seoul spread out beneath them, like something out of a dream Monica never could have predicted for herself when she'd first stepped off that plane 6 years ago, with 2 suitcases and a notebook full of plans. "Do you remember," Monica said, leaning against the railing beside him, "what I said to you that first night? At the gala?" "Just pretend," Jinwoo said, the smallest smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "It was supposed to be pretend," Monica said softly, turning to look at him. "All of it. The relationship, the contract, the whole arrangement." Jinwoo took her hand gently, his thumb tracing slow circles across her knuckles. The same hands that had cut through ropes and dismantled an entire criminal organization to bring her home safely, now moving with infinite tenderness. "For you, maybe," he said. "For me, it stopped being pretend the moment you kissed me." Monica felt her breath catch, her heart doing something warm and overwhelming in her chest. "Jinwoo, I've spent years pushing people away," he continued, his voice low and steady despite the rawness of what he was admitting. "Trust never led anywhere good for me. Everyone I let close eventually wanted something, eventually betrayed something. I built an entire life around never letting anyone matter enough to hurt me again." He looked at her, really looked at her, the same way he had that night in the car, when neither of them had been brave enough to name what was happening between them. "And then you grabbed my jacket and kissed me in front of 200 people, and somehow you became the one person in years I actually trusted completely. I was terrified when you found me," Monica admitted. "Not just because of what was happening, because I realized, sitting in that chair, that the person I most wanted to see, the person I needed to come find me, wasn't James. It was you. It's always going to be you." Jinwoo pulled her closer, resting his forehead gently against hers, the city lights blurring softly around them. "3 months ago," he murmured, "you walked into my life by accident. I'm not letting you walk back out of it now that I know what it feels like to actually want someone in my life, instead of just managing them." "Is that your version of a love confession?" Monica asked, laughing softly despite the tears gathering in her eyes. "I run an empire built on careful words," Jinwoo said. "But with you, I find I don't need to be careful at all." He kissed her then, slow and certain, none of the panic or performance of that first reckless kiss in the ballroom. Just 2 people who had somehow, against every reasonable expectation, found exactly what they needed in each other. Monica Williams had come to Seoul chasing a dream of building something from nothing, never imagining that losing the wrong man, in the cruelest, most public way possible, would eventually lead her toward the right one entirely. Sometimes the door that closes in pain is protecting the path that leads to peace. Monica had spent months believing James's betrayal was the worst thing that had ever happened to her. Standing on that rooftop, wrapped in the arms of a man who had torn apart an organization just to bring her home safely, she finally understood that sometimes heartbreak isn't punishment at all. Sometimes it's redirection. Sometimes losing the wrong person simply clears space for the right one to finally walk through the door. If you were Monica, would you have attended that gala after everything James put you through? Do you think he deserved any kind of second chance at all? And at what exact moment do you think this whole pretend relationship stopped being pretend? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because we genuinely want to hear what you think. If you enjoyed this story, imagine having 20 more unforgettable mafia boss romances ready to read or listen to whenever you want. That's exactly why I created the Ultimate Mafia Boss Love Collection. Inside, you'll find 15 complete stories, 20 audiobook versions, and 5 exclusive bonus stories that aren't available on YouTube. You can get instant access through the link in the description. We bring you powerful Afro-Korean stories just like this one, filled with emotion, mystery, danger, and the kind of unforgettable love nobody saw coming. Subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss a new release, and we'll see you in the very next story. Until then, besties, stay safe, stay hopeful, and remember, sometimes the love you never planned for ends up being the love you needed most all along.